Hello, and welcome back to Comedy Means Business. It's August 18th, and our guests today are Angelo Covino and Kyle Marvin, a duo doing something singular in theatrical comedy. Within the last decade, Covino and Marvin have worked together as filmmakers to conceive fresh, well-written, and visually compelling relationship comedies as starring vehicles for themselves. Their first feature together was The Climb, a dramedy based on their short of the same name that revels in bromance, betrayal, and general emotional messiness. The film marked the two as bold new voices to watch in indie comedy, picking up a jury award in its premiere at Cannes, even if its subsequent release with Sony Pictures Classics was hampered by the pandemic. In between separate creative endeavors, the pair worked in subsequent years on a handful of scripts and got to a greenlight first with Splitsville, a bold and formally innovative comedy that Neon releases later this week. The film's plot is thrust in motion when Ashley, played by Adria Arjona, drops a bombshell on her husband Carrie, played by Marvin. She's been unfaithful and wants a divorce. Dakota Johnson and Covino co-star as Carrie's married friends Julie and Paul, to whom he runs for comfort. After learning that an open marriage has been key to their happiness, he decides to ask Ashley for one to salvage his relationship, and chaos ensues. In the following conversation on Splitsville, Covino and Marvin discuss all that goes into preserving their tonally sophisticated indie visions in their journey to the big screen. Michael and Kyle, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Thanks for being here. So Splitsville is great, and like your previous film, The Climb, a relationship comedy unlike anything else out there. Briefly to start, could you guys explain a little about how you originally connected and what it was that bonded you as collaborators?
Initially, Kyle cast me in this commercial where I had to walk up to people on the streets and like buy things for them. We like gave away like $20,000. And I think I was like, oh, these guys have money, so I should work with them more. So then I started like ADing for their company. You know, Kyle was doing a bunch of commercials, and then eventually we were producing commercials together, and we just sort of like, I think quickly realized we had a shared sense of humor and kind of like creatively collaborated well together.
Yeah, I think when we were doing those commercials, generally we would mess around after the commercial was done being shot. We'd have cameras up and have done some like setups and be like, why don't we just leave it up for a little bit longer? And we'd sort of like do sketches and mess around, and started immediately clicking in terms of like, oh, we're both into the same kind of humor. And that really sort of set us up in terms of like, oh, we could do things outside of just producing commercials. We could partner up for other.
It was like every commercial we did, we used it as an excuse to shoot a short film because we had equipment and crew. We'd be like, all right, here's the deal. And it's like the last day we would get it done in 4 hours, and we'd be like, we got 5 more hours. We're going to shoot this thing over here. And people would be like, what?
I can't wait till our old clients hear this. They're like, those sons of bitches.
There's a reason why we're not doing that anymore.
Well, I grew up idolizing people like the Duplass brothers, who found a way into things by building their own projects as filmmakers and stars and making names for themselves that way. You still see it today, but not as much. What led you down that specific path while you've also both been doing these different things as actors and filmmakers separately?
Well, I mean, we both have sort of like very different, or not very different, but like different artistic career paths that seem to run parallel and coincide quite a bit. But for me, it was, I always loved acting. I just, for the life of me, besides like off-Broadway plays and commercials that Kyle cast me in, and then like really, really indie films, I wasn't getting much work. So, and I was always a filmmaker. I was always writing and directing. And so it becomes really easy to say, like, you have an idea and you want to execute it, and you can play a certain role. So you write a role for yourself, or we write roles for each other. And I think, when you creatively collaborate with someone for over a decade, you get into a rhythm of understanding like what they can do really well, or what would be fun to see them try. And I think it just became like there's certainly an opportunity. I think we'd love to make films where that we don't act in, but with the specificity of tone of like the type of films that we want to make, I think there's a shorthand with Kyle and I, because we get the comedy and we get how like the characters need to not be in on the comedy, and that sort of I think, that it becomes easy to cast yourself, or sort of like want to just do it yourself when you kind of really intrinsically understand what you're trying to do.
Yeah.
It's also just a lot of fun. You know what I mean? Like, and
it is fun.
And it's a little, and it's a little bit selfish, but also like, no one else was casting us when we first started, and we thought we did it ourselves because we thought we could do it, and we enjoy it. So.
Yeah.
When you go out and you pitch the movie, they're like, "Who's playing this role?" They're like, "We are," and then you just like let it sit there and you see if they blink. It's like, oh, they didn't flinch. I guess we're gonna get to do this. This is crazy.
Spot on.
Did they flinch to start?
Some people flinched.
No, wait, on this movie or on
the climb?
Topic didn't, but people did.
Oh yeah, some financiers were like, "Oh, interesting. Well, maybe we'll cast. Who are you going to cast?" And we were like, "Us." And we kind of presented it very clearly as like it's a non-starter. The company we made it with, they were like, "Oh, we wouldn't make it with anyone else." And because I think they understood that the thing that made the short work was the tone and the comedic timing and the fact that Kyle and I kind of have a off-screen chemistry that translates to an on-screen.
Right. Well, you had an advantage out of the gate in bringing Splitsville to life, in that you had this prior film, The Climb, which you made with Topic Studios, and you had a first look deal with them, and they came aboard as a producer on this project. How much easier did that make things? How did it change the process? And what did your initial pitch to them entail?
On this movie, well, this was part of our first look deal. So this was just one of the movies we wrote during that first look deal. So we were like, hey, we want to do The Climb, but opposite, where Kyle's character is the one sort of causing all the chaos. I mean, it was sort of an oversimplification, but like at the very outset, we like came up with this idea for the movie, but we were like, hey, guess what? We're going to do a similar thing, but it's just going to be reversed roles. And then obviously we gave them the actual pitch of the movie. But they were on board with it. They were really excited about it from day one. I mean, there was never from the moment we kind of came up with the idea to then we just wrote the script, and we were pretty much just on a trajectory to go make it.
Was the dynamic with them always the understanding you're going to have final cuts, or like how do they weigh in on the process? Yeah.
So, I mean, without getting too into detail, the nice thing about them as partners, and there's a couple partners out there that we've experienced, like they would never, like they're not in the business of going to war with their filmmakers. They're in the business of like being on filmmakers and shepherding forward that doesn't mean we don't get into disagreements about things or really get, specific about specific notes and things like that. But I think there's a shared respect that we as filmmakers, with Kyle and I, at the script stage and at the even through the edit, with Topic and Neon, they really were very like, not hands off. They made their notes known, but, we talked it through. And if we disagreed, it was sort of like, you got to bet on the filmmakers at a certain point, especially with movies of this size.
But I would say it's healthy to have feedback. I mean, it's healthy to have them put pressure, if only to pressure test your ideas. So I think this idea of like shepherding yourself away from any, criticism or pressure doesn't necessarily make the best movie. I think they've got to default to the people who are like, we believe that this is the right choice. But I do think it's healthy to hear their feedback and to have them participate in the conversation so that we can, make the best decisions.
Was there one or two biggest notes that they had throughout the process?
They were like, how are people going to buy that these two guys are with those two women? That was a big note.
From the get-go.
I still haven't figured out how to handle that note, but it comes up it clearly is coming up in reviews. So it's great. We're just going to, let that one sit there. No, I don't know. I have some friends from high school who are far worse looking than me and Kyle, and they are with some of, like, and you're just like, how did you end up with this person? So, I mean, it's definitely believable. It might not be like, might not see it all the time, but it happens.
100%. Yeah.
You can attest to that.
Yes, certainly. Well, your films together suggest an interest in something structurally experimental, in elevated comedy that pushes into the extremes of the human emotional experience. Can you talk about what informs that and maybe elaborate a bit on how your goals here compared to those for The Climb?
There is an underpinning, I think, for both of us that like we want to make sure people are entertained when they sit down to watch a movie. And I think for us, that means like not holding back if you can make everything interesting and compelling and believable, why would you hold back on the scenarios or situations that are fun to watch, or or have things going on that put pressure on character? And I think for us, we talk a lot about that entertainment value and how what the experience of viewing the movie is going to be, and how we make that experience as fun as possible.
Yeah.
But to speak to the tone, I think that's like in some ways like the North Star a lot of times with everything we're doing, because a lot of times we're throwing things at the wall. We're coming up with ideas, and then we're always sort of like filtering it through. Does this dismantle the tone of this film? Does this go too far in one direction? Is it too saccharine and too emotional and sort of like grounded in character, or is it too absurd and slapstick and ridiculous? And like are we dismantling the integrity of the movie? And I don't know the answer to that. I just know that we set out to sort of take two sides, almost like not two different types of movie, but to go for after like really kind of like grounded emotions and characters who are believing the situations that they're going through, while at the same time sort of like thrusting them into absurd situations and farcical at times things, and letting them like still hopefully stay grounded in character, but like let that absurdity or that's slapstick or that sort of lowbrow stuff sort of like be juxtaposed with like images that might feel like they were maybe well crafted or like a wide static master with crazy things going on. There's something like there's something that felt very ripe there and to explore. And I think tonally it sits in this sort of thing where we're constantly trying to like not fuck with the audience, but subvert and surprise the expectation of what's going to happen.
Yeah.
I would also say, Mike, that one additional point to it is like the approach in the filmmaking approach is, from the get-go, we have a really clear idea of the comedy of the scene and what's happening. And so the approach from Mike's side of directing is very much like the camera can be more active and participate in the scene, because it's not two cameras set up and us trying to beat each other with the best joke in the moment. There is a different kind of approach to the comedy of it, which I think makes it look and feel different than a lot of contemporary comedy in that way.
Yeah, is there more to say there? Because I just think this film is so gorgeous, and it's so hard to do something that feels elevated in this way while working within a limited setting. Very different movie, but Heretic last year I thought was just phenomenal in what it was able to pull off, and it makes you forget about any limitations and not even feel that. So how do you do that? Like, what, as a director and as collaborators on set, is instrumental in ensuring you achieve a certain kind of scope or aesthetic?
Well, I think a lot of it has to do with the collaborators we bring in. We had incredible, some who we've worked with in the past, some who, Adam Newport-Barrow, this was my first time working with him, but, he knocked it out of the park with this film. And really, I was looking for someone who had a strong point of view on what they would want to do. And sort of like, and so when we started working together, it was clear, like he came with kind of like, strong ideas, and those ideas didn't necessarily always intersect with my ideas. And what sometimes happens is like through that creative friction and collaboration of finding it and talking it through, and sometimes like even disagreement, you'll find you push each other. And so I think everyone on the film, at least on the visual side, from Stephen Phelps, who was our production designer, and Callan Stokes, who's our costume designer, like everyone's pushing and pushing and pushing to both make what their work on screen matter and important, but it kind of gets to a place where you're like, oh, this is a conversation, this is the type of work you'd be doing typically on maybe like a different type of film. But because our bar was really high for this film, like it's a comedy, but we don't come in going, okay, like flat studio lighting and like, let's set up two cameras so that we can cover and we get every line so that we can improvise a lot and find it. It's like that approach in itself, I think, can sometimes lead to a certain outcome. And when you come in and you go, we're covering this scene with 3 shots, or, we have a wide master, and then we have two singles, or we have a moving master that goes into this section, and then at the end it pops out to this sort of wide, and we're going to pick it up for the back half. It limits you, but it also, you're making decisions, and so you're like going, how am I visually navigating this story? What's the perspective? And so you have to talk about that in advance, and you have to almost like craft the whole scene to accommodate that. And I think what comes out of that is like just a point of view, and it's a visual point of view.
And I think that applies to, Mike was talking about our department heads, but I think it also really applies to on the talent side too, which is just like getting everyone aligned with what the expectations are and how we're going to be performing these things, because it's incumbent on them to be confident and know exactly what they're doing in the scene, because we are shooting it in longer takes, or because we're covering one part of a scene with one sort of continuous dynamic camera move.
Mm-hmm. Well, Mike, you mentioned your DP, Adam. He's having quite a year.
He really is.
Fresh off of an Emmy nomination for the studio. It's cool when you see an artisan who's making such a clear mark and doing something that is capturing the attention, and he's such a big part of these projects in terms of achieving a certain vision.
Yeah, Adam's great. I was so grateful to have worked with him on this, and like, it's cool to see him having a moment. I mean, that show's incredible and bold and new and different and interesting, and like it's
also very interested in elaborate tracking shots.
Yeah, totally. Well, yeah, it really leans into that, which is obviously, something I did on our first film. It's cool. It's fun to and then what's cool about that show too is it also kind of like goes into like, it's like very meta and like it's doing the thing while exploring how the thing is done, which is kind of funny.
Totally.
I think the great thing too about Adam is we shot on 35 millimeter, and I think his ability to capture the images on film, particularly like the low light scene, Mike, outside with the pottery. There's some really just beautiful dynamic shots that he put together. And because, we had limited time and a limited budget on this one, I think he really did a great job with what he had at his disposal.
I love the low light scenes in the beach house. Are just like, wow, it's really amazing. Good. So I'm curious, like, you tend to lean into physical comedy. You've got these incredible stunts in the film. One really extended fight scene between you that is just nuts. It felt to me reminiscent of some of the experimental stuff Bill Hader and Alec Berg did with Barry.
Yeah.
How do you pull that off working within a limited budget, also knowing you're going to be shooting on film? Like, that seems like such a high bar to clear.
Well, with that one, I mean, that was an early idea for the script and the movie, and something we were very adamant about doing from like day one, which was, there's going to be this sort of, 8 to 10 minute fight sequence in the middle of the film, and Kyle and I are going to do all our own stunts, and that was sort of like the pitch, which was, and everyone was like, okay, sure. And then we got into the making of it, and cutting days down and trying to minimize the schedule and hold on to shooting film. And of course, like, the easy thing would be to sort of simplify that, or to do it with stunt doubles, or to do it a certain way. But I think it wouldn't have been possible if Kyle and I weren't like fully committed to the rehearsal and the training. So we just did a lot of training to where, like, when we showed up on set, we were like, all right, roll cameras. And we had choreographed and rehearsed the physicality of the fight scene at a gym so many times that, like, we would just do it in one take. And then, we might've missed a moment or something didn't really read for camera that well, and we would do it again. But there was really we had the luxury of having all the time in the world to work, like, a 16-hour day if we had to. So we could just rehearse at 11.
Just beating the hell out of each other for 16 hours.
I mean, not the whole day, but once the day was over, we would go to the gym, and we would train, and we would just, like, not beat each other up, but figure out how to make it look like we were beating each other up.
Yeah. Wow. So cool.
But Kyle was black and blue by, day. I mean, we shot the whole fight scene on days -1 and 2. So basically we shot 3 days before principal photography. We did the whole fight scene. So when we started principal photography, we had already shot the fight scene. So that's how we did it. We sort of pulled it off the schedule and then said, oh, we're going to do this as a produced unit.
Yeah.
And then I walked on set for our first actual day, and there's a nude scene in the shower, and I take my clothes off, and the hair and makeup department, it's like, what the fuck? It's just bruises everywhere on my body. They're like, what are we supposed to do with this?
It's like covering up tattoos.
100%. Yeah.
Wow. I'm curious. I mean, writing, obviously, the writing process is so integral, I'm sure, to the final product here. But I'm curious about the post process, which is another form of writing when it comes to comedy. Like, how much of the film would you say you were able to make even funnier with fine tuning in post? Can you talk about some of the ways that happens? And like, I'm curious if you implemented test screenings for this film.
Well, certainly I'm not funny in real life, so Mike makes me funny in the edit.
Kyle, that was hilarious. Nice.
Thanks.
That was good.
Edit that later.
You really nailed it. We did some tests. We sort of, so it was a really short post process on this because we were trying to have the movie ready for Cannes, and we only finished shooting in like November or end of October, November. And, you know, and there was a little bit of, so we really started screening the movie for friends and people who we thought would give good feedback in like end of like mid-January, and then, you know, turned the film in for submitted to Cannes in March. So it was a pretty quick turnaround, but we did do one test screening where we sort of did like a more like proper one just to get like feedback to see like how it plays with an audience who maybe isn't like another editor who's in the middle of cutting some TV show, or a filmmaker who hasn't made a film in 4 years, or like, you know, like there's the notes that come out of some of these like friends and family screenings are can really, really like set you back where you're like, what did I make? I should just give up. So it's good to also then pair that with like a proper, you know, recruited screening where you can just get like people who have, there's no horse in the race. They're just like, hey, I just want to see a neon movie. And they come in and they give you the feedback where you're like, oh, this joke is working. This scene is working. This is dragging, you know, and you kind of, then you take it and you do what you can to sort of not to cater to the audience, but to cater to yourself and use the information for the audience to make a film that you want to watch in 10 years, but also that's entertaining. And so like, that's the sweet spot. Like there's a lot of stuff we could have done with this film to cater to some of the notes that we got and some of the feedback that we got. But at the end of the day, like if you do that too much, then you're just sort of like rounding off the edges of the thing. And I think then it sometimes doesn't stand out as much. So you kind of have to find that balance.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Part of, I think the thing that we chase is also just that sometimes when the audience leans in because they don't understand, it's as much fun as being fed the information. And so sometimes less is more in terms of like, maybe they don't need to know exactly what's going on in this dynamic because you're going to watch it unfold, or you're going to look at their body gestures, you know, and see and interpret something that we maybe know, or we maybe have, you know, a scene that could fill it in, but we wouldn't want to put that in.
Mm-hmm. Well, with this project, you were able to have marketing conversations from the outset. What were those conversations? Because as we've discussed, this is a story in a very particular tone, and I could imagine it being like a challenge to capture what it is and to can you talk about that process in terms of promoting the film and explaining to people, like making that sell?
Well, I think, you know, the first conversation is like, what are the comps for this film? And the answer quickly became there really isn't a good comp, which is, I think in some ways a good thing. Like if you set out to make a movie and you're like, I don't know what the comp is for this, I guess it's this or this, but they're totally sort of like very different tonally. To me, that excites me because I was like, oh, we're trying to make something that, you know, if you did have a comp, it'd be so long ago that like it doesn't count because the whole the economics of the industry have changed. So, you know, with that being sort of like at the starting place, I think it was really like figuring out who enjoys the film, who the market, who's our audience really, like, and that's not one group or one thing, but it's like who's the audience and how do we kind of let them know that this will be a good time and they'll be entertained. Even if they like hate the film, they'll laugh. And I think like that's the thing I think I do have confidence in, is like there's some like undeniably funny scenes in the film, just because seeing someone ride a roller coaster,
that was phenomenal,
trying to hold fish, is just like an insane thing. And I think when we came up with that idea, we were like, oh, we have to shoot this, we have to figure this out one way or another, because I've never seen that in a movie, and that was exciting to me.
That was like my favorite visual idea. That was amazing.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. And I think that Neon because it was there from the beginning, and they obviously read the script and said, hell yeah. And I think that they were on board from the get-go that this was going to be different, and they're great partners in the sense that like they're willing to take risk. They're willing to do weird stuff, to get the word out there and try and catch our tone and implement that into the materials.
Yeah, Neon's been great. They're maybe more aggressive than we are. They're like, what about this? I'm like, that's the craziest idea I've ever heard, guys. That's good. They're like, okay, we're just throwing things at the wall. Like there's something really exciting when the company marketing your film has crazier ideas than the filmmakers in some ways.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, we did have the idea to take the naked together picture in front of the sign, but that was only because we really liked their marketing campaign on that film, and we thought the film was great.
Yeah. It's a shame that the marketplace for film has become so tough that you rarely see a great indie like Splitsville that is properly supported in this way and afforded a chance to break through in the zeitgeist. How have you found the experience of navigating the landscape between your early work and now? So much has changed, like you alluded to.
Well, it's been weird for everyone. I think to try to like say like, we released The Climb, and our release date on The Climb was supposed to be March 2020. So like it never happened. And then it came out in November that year, but all the theaters were still closed. So wow. In a strange way, that movie didn't have a proper release, and we're lucky that, it even got to go to festivals and people saw it enough to where we get to make more movies. So in that way, we were like incredibly grateful. But I Kyle and I talk about this a lot. Like we could spend a ton of time trying to figure out how the macro nature of this industry is affecting our stuff, or we could just say like, let's just go make this type of movie. And like, I think singular points of view that are well executed and that connect, like it'll always sort of cut through no matter what time it is. So it's like, we're almost like kind of removed ourselves from the industry component of just like, if we just make funny films, people will go see them hopefully. And then if they don't, then we'll make another one, and then we'll make another one. And eventually like, you create hopefully a marketplace where people, want to go see them. But to me, like the most exciting thing is the idea of the theatrical experience of watching comedies, because I don't know, it's like that. I didn't realize how much that had disappeared until we were sitting in Cannes watching it in a room full of like 650 people laughing. Yeah. And I was like, whoa, when was the last time this happened?
Seriously.
Like genuinely, like when I don't even remember the last time having this experience, and it was my own film. And then you go and you see Naked Gun, and you like start, and you're like, wait, it's like muscle memory. Like everyone's getting back into the rhythm of
laughing. It's a beautiful thing.
It's a really beautiful thing. And so that's why I'm so fired up that like this movie's coming out right now, because I'm just like, oh, there's like people are getting used to the idea of like, no, I'm going to actually go to the movies. I'm going to watch a comedy. I'm going to laugh my ass off with a group of people. And it's going to be a better experience than any of my other movie-going experiences this year.
So what is your take on streaming then? Obviously you're gonna try to go for theaters first, like most filmmakers, but what do you think about streaming with comedy and generally for where we are right now?
I think streaming is inevitable. I mean, I think it's already here, so there's not really much to comment on anymore. And the fact that like it's here already, and it is what it is. But I do think that streaming, the benefit of streaming is it allows comedians who would, traditionally not have access to audiences to get audiences. I just think it's worth, bringing those people and those people's audiences into theaters. So like if someone can find and grow an audience online and then you give them the opportunity to be in theaters, I think you could expand that reach just to more people and also bring it into that setting, which feels more like a comedy show or, that group experience that people like where they all sit together and laugh and have an experience where someone's like really bad, annoying laughter behind you is as fun, as much part of the experience as your own sort of like watching the movie, which is, I think, all the fun of it.
Yeah.
There's a reason why comedies have become sort of not synonymous, have landed on streaming platforms, like, and because, when you've had a long day, like, what do you want to do? You want to sit down, you want to like laugh for a half hour, maybe you watch like an episode of The Office or Parks and Rec or whatever thing that is like your comfort thing, right? And then you're like, all right, cool, now I gotta go, or I'm folding laundry, or I'm doing whatever, and like, so that's an inevitable place where the sort of rewatchability of things, or like, but they're not mutually exclusive. And I think what's cool is that a lot of these companies are realizing that like you actually create an audience that cares about the film, and you create like a future nostalgia when people have an experience with a film in a movie theater. And so that's everything, right? And so I think like if you want to create long-term value for a film, then it's like just create a small window, put it in theaters, let it find its audience, and then it'll be on streaming platforms until the rest of time. But like you get that moment where you had to get up, go buy popcorn, sit with a group of people and laugh your ass off, and like that's invaluable. I don't think you could trade that for anything, because you're never going to recreate that experience in a living room.
Right. Well, with comedy, I mean, you've taken both of these projects you've made together to Cannes. I'm curious, do you give credence to the position that comedy doesn't travel internationally? I would imagine not.
Not at all.
Well, I think like when film, at the advent of cinema, what were the first like blockbusters? It was like Charlie Chaplin and Buster Keaton, and a ton of pre-code stuff where everyone was naked. But like for the most part, it was slapstick. It was silent films where people were falling down or crashing into things, or a hose was spraying them in the face, and that is universal and goes worldwide. So I think quite the opposite. Like when you have very specific topical comedy that is like of a place and speaking to zeitgeist only, then sure, like it might not translate. But universal comedy is like, I think translates better than any other genre.
Yeah.
And the truth is, I laugh at foreign films, so I know it moves me. Like some of the things that I find the funniest come from other languages. So I think there's something about the physicality of it that makes maybe I'm drawn more to like physical, exaggeration for the comedy. But I like foreign comedies, so I imagine they probably could like ours.
I feel like this point matters a lot, probably because distributors, studios are not necessarily inclined generally to put comedies to support them really internationally in an expansive way, right?
Yeah, I don't know look, it's tough. I think like everything's so in flux. We could look at the last 4 or 5 years and go like, this is what it is. But I don't know. Like it's like if you don't have like interesting filmmakers making interesting, funny comedies, then like what is going to be marketed? You know what I mean? And that's not to say those filmmakers aren't out there, but a lot of them are making films directly to go to streaming, or making TV shows, or it's spread. Everything's spread around. So the hope is that like there's sort of like this recognition of like, oh, like even if it's a third of the size of what it used to be when, comedies would open and cross $200 million domestically. Like, there's still space for it. There's still space for it. And there's an audience out there that's sort of craving it.
Yeah.
And I think nationally too.
Yeah, for sure. In interviews recently, you've mentioned a couple of other scripts of bigger scope you've been developing alongside Splitsville. I'm curious, in a general sense, obviously we can't give anything away specifically, but what would you want to do with a bigger budget? Because you've been able to do so much with not too much.
Well, I think Kyle and I come from a sort of like very hands-on producing background. So, we were producing independent films before either of us had directed one. And, we've done a lot of the jobs on set, like line producing and ADing and production designing. And like, I think what comes with that is sort of an understanding of, and it's not that where waste is, but it's like, there's a limitation of what you can do on a 24-day shoot, right? There's a limit, like it whittles away at this. And so I think what we get excited about when we're talking about making bigger movies is really just like scope and like taking the same ethos, taking the same approach to filmmaking, but sort of putting it on screen in a very big way. Like, I love doing the car crash in this and the fight scenes in this, like that type of stuff mixed with like comedy and mixed with like emotional moments, like is just it's so exciting. And I think like when you have a little more at your disposal, when you could like really blow something up or really do crazy things, then I think you could kind of you could surprise the audience in even more provocative ways and kind of put more spectacle on the screen.
Yeah.
But always stay grounded to the kind of character stuff.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, money doesn't necessarily change. I mean, some obviously, but money doesn't necessarily change the dynamic of what we're chasing on screen from performance and emotion and the comedy. All it does is allow us to sort of like pack around it things that are just like even more like the things that we would wish we could do that we pull back on a little bit because we're like, we could never do that. It's just like, oh, well, maybe we can introduce these like even crazier things in the movie that are possible.
Mm-hmm.
Our sort of approach to writing is like, figure out who these characters are, put them in put them in situations that would be hilarious or cringeworthy or, uncomfortable, and then watch it sort of play out and watch how they sort of like respond to it and how the plot takes us to places we wouldn't expect. And I think once, when you scale up the budget a little bit, the possibilities of where it can take you and what situations you can put them in become in some ways more exciting or potentially more entertaining.
Yeah. Are there any sort of specific items on your bucket list at the moment as filmmakers?
I don't know. What's on your bucket list, Kyle?
Jesus. This is a good question.
Well, a Christmas movie for sure.
Okay. We need more, it's one of these things where it's so great to get another one to add to the pantheon. I love The Holdovers so much, and now every year I can watch The Holdovers, and it's like, It's so great. Yeah. Christmas movies are awesome.
Christmas movie, a Western for sure.
Okay. So you're thinking like Alexander Payne for sure. Like he's been in that. That's where he's been. He's going from Christmas movie to Western, I believe.
Yeah, I'm just whatever Alexander Payne does next, that we'll just put that on our list.
we have his IMDb pulled up, and every time it gets an update,
we can just let us know
what the screenplay we can do.
This conversation would go way easier if you could just tell us what Alexander Payne's attached to.
Totally.
And maybe he falls off, and we'll just do that instead.
Yeah. Do you know what you're going to do next?
Here's the thing. So we try not to talk about things until they're completely baked.
No, 100%.
And I think the reason for that is just like things fall apart so many times and they come together in different ways. And, all of a sudden you're working with one actor and then you're working with another. It's just like, it's always like this evolving sort of thing. And so our thing is just like, let's just put our heads down and try to get the project together. And then once it's like happening or being,
100%.
So do we know what we're doing next? We have an idea of what we're doing next.
Yeah, we have an idea of what we're doing next. I think we're just locking in on what exactly that next thing is. But we've got plenty of things that we've set up. I mean, we've spent a lot of time in this industry, trying to, writing and building projects, and have a long list of things that we want to do that are ambitious. And I think we're just lining up how those get checked out.
We have another original script that we wrote with Topic, which we're going to do. And then we have, and then we'll see what else.
Well, thank you for making this film. It's very gratifying to see something with great comedy, visual ideas, something to say, heart. So thank you. And Splitsville opens in limited theaters on August 22nd before expanding wide on September 5th. Michael and Kyle, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for doing this.
Good talking to you.